like to see something more structured into the development of budgets. If the department heads had some sort of a structure to fill in their needs for their departments, then I think the budget could come together more quickly and more coherently.
Yeah, I actually, there's a lot of issues with the budget process. The one that bothers me more than anything is this. The structure issue that you're talking about is very important, but it leads to the other issue, which is when we sit down to decide where the revenues are going to be deployed, out of this amount of money, this is what we can do. We don't have a good way of assessing priorities. We have lists of things, and everybody wants this, that, and the other thing. But when we come down to it, our job as council, in my opinion, is to take all this and look at it, but then we have to have a structure to put it all together. And for priority purposes. Now, let me just make a point here, which is, if you looked at our budgets, you would think that repairing roads was an option. You know, like I'm going to Bali next year if I get enough money. It is, instead of, it's an essential, fundamental part of the community to maintain its roads, to maintain the basic structures inside of the city. And so every choice we make about if we're going to build something new that's behemoth, what is that going to do to the long-term costs that we're dealing with? When we make raises of various kinds, we need to be looking in those contexts too. Obviously, our employees have to have raises on some rational basis because just like everybody else, they have issues with costs and everything. But what is going on here is we're taking this piece and deciding, okay, well that's what they need and they need and they need, but we don't put it together. And we certainly cannot make essential functions like road repair optional.
Right.
And we have been doing that for 20 years. Part of the reason for that is we have directed our money towards a new city hall while we were paying for the old city hall 20 years ago. And we directed our funds to a recreation center that was only Macedonia only until we found out we couldn't support it. So we need to be thinking long term about what's going on, and that was $1 million a year just directed to those construction loans. That means roads and other things get short shrift, and that's what's happened.
Well, that's part of identifying what is needed to run the city, an absolute need to run the city as opposed to a want.
Yes.
And I have no problem with the department heads thinking what they would like to have to make their departments run more efficiently, to do better for the city and the residents. I have no problem with them brainstorming all they want to on that. But there has to be a list of basic needs. This is what we have to do to run this city.
Right, and I think that's the mayor and council who have to be on the page on that, and not simply in an argument about it. So
well, that's where you see in some of these, like finance work sessions, people are talking too much about wants or maybe catching up from a deficit they're in or whatever.
Right, instead of saying, here's what we've got now, here's what we absolutely have to have.
Exactly. That has to be a little more structured in the way it's driven.
I don't know, Joe, do you think that too from what you've been looking at or not?
Yeah, I believe so. The transparency thing is so important going forward. And some of the simplification of the budget process.
Yeah, well,
and it's all process related. In my work experience with GE, we're process oriented. Jack Welch drummed that into us: process, process, process.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
And that's why it was so successful during those years. And I'm a process oriented person. There are steps to make things easier, faster, quicker.
And if you don't do
more
those
efficient.
things, you create, what I call clogs in the stream here.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree, that has been drummed into a lot of people as we were working on the reinvention of government plans, even in the department. We had a number of those steps where we were taking 20 steps when we needed to do 5 and be better served, not get any rash decisions, but better serve our community that we were trying to support. So
that's the bottom line: serving the community, and how do we make it faster, quicker, simpler, clear, more transparent. That's today's society, and that's my focus of process.
Right. Yes, yeah.
Getting back to the transparency and budget meetings, there are a number of people, residents that attend some of the budget meetings.
Yes.
They can get to be very long and very boring, particularly seeing that the residents are never provided any information to be able to guide them during the budget meetings. I think at the very least, it is part of the transparency that we're looking for, that it would be nice if the residents attending the budget meetings could have the information as to what the actual figures in spending were the previous year,
Right.
and the original proposed budget that you start working with.
Yeah, we do work with that, but here's the thing. One, I've done a lot to try to increase transparency through getting our expenditures on ohiocheckbook.com, and
Which I think is wonderful. Yeah.
and we can do a lot of comparisons off of that, but I agree with you. We do work with a structure in our budget normally that is presented by the finance director, but it isn't shared widely. It's and I think it should be, because just like the ordinances, people need to know what we're really talking about.
Well, I think you'd get more attendance at the meetings if they had a guide of, oh, okay, this is what we spent on X last year. Looks like it's a 50% increase. Gee, I really want to look into that and ask some questions. And that's the other point I'd like to make.
well, you're right.
Maybe not in every budget meeting as we go through the process to prepare it, but there should be a couple of the budget meetings that the residents are allowed to ask
Well,
questions.
you know what, we could start with, again, and you're talking about potential for using social media to plug in at text or, and actually watch live streams of the meeting. You could do that with a preparatory meetings, a couple of meetings, and then when you get into more and more technical things, then we can basically, then we all know what, at least we've gotten input from the residents on what they are considering important. That's what I think is a good idea, and I think we should do it. I think the problem that we're having is this. In the past, and this is basically Ohio law, where everybody's in person and all of that, that's, 50 years ago when I was a young pup, that's exactly what people would do. They would go to meetings and they would have all these discussions in person. And that is no longer really a viable option from a number of standpoints. I think we need to change how we're conducting business to allow for much more public participation via social media and internet kinds of things, because we can benefit from it from the resident's standpoint, but we can also benefit from the structure and process standpoint of trying to figure out what things are so important to the residents we need to pay attention, and what things may be at the margin and we don't need to do a lot with. And which would be nice to have, but then when you're looking at budgets, you always say, well, I must do this, and this over here, this would be, if I'm looking at optional things that we'd like to do, what would we do over here? Which of these things? We have a number of things, like really important issues with regard to, we have a very sprawled out service department structure with 4 different sites. We should be changing that. We should rationalize that and reduce the number of sites at least to 2, in my opinion. And we haven't been able to work on that, but that's something we need a long-term plan for. We just can't do it like snap our fingers. So, I'm going to cut it off here, because what I want to do is just have a chance to talk about certain issues, and I know that we can get too long and then people won't listen. But I want more of this to happen, not only in a place where we can chat. I'd love to talk to people, but I would like to also have us begin to do this online now. And let's try to get that to happen. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
All right, thanks for the opportunity.